My name's Jen Robinson. I'm currently the EVP of Product and Engineering at Zephyr. We're headquartered here in Los Angeles. I'm pictured here in this photo in one of my standard work from home styles, headphones in the backyard, on a call with wearing my son Jack in the baby carrier. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. It's a whole mood. I thought to get started, I would talk a little bit about my journey. I really started my career in tech as an undergrad at the University of Chicago, where I studied computer science. I was actually one of the first classes of CS majors to graduate from Chicago because the program was so new. So that'll give you a sense for how long ago that was. My first job was as a junior engineer. I was building client server apps right out of school. I took a couple of different engineering jobs, and then I had an opportunity to step into a role as a solution architect and then a tech team lead. That was about 5 years out of college, and so I had my first experience then managing people. I moved from Chicago to Philly, and I took a job as a solution architect at SAP. I was at their North American headquarters in Newtown Square outside the city, for those of you familiar with the Philly area on the East Coast. SAP at the time was about 60,000 employees, and so that was a huge change of pace for me to move from academia at the university where I had worked for so many years to a much, much larger company. I really enjoyed the architecture work that I was doing there, but I wasn't really sure kind of where I wanted to take my career. And at the time, I was really into the music scene in Philly. I was writing a music blog. I was going to cover all the shows in town. I'm a lifelong music fan, terrible musician, but I'm a loyal fan. And I was starting to think about how I could bring those things together. What I was getting excited about in my personal life and what I was doing professionally. And so I looked into going to business school. A couple different grad school routes, but ended up looking at business schools. And I found out that New York University had a program in entertainment management, and it sounded really cool. So I took the GMAT, I applied to one school, NYU, I got in, and I started there like 3 months later. And so once I was there, I started taking classes, and I realized that the entertainment management track was cool, but I didn't really need to do it. I could take the classes and join the clubs and do all of that, sort of independently. And so instead, I decided to jump into the flagship program there. So NYU is basically on Wall Street, and that program was finance. So I graduated with my MBA with a specialization in finance. While I was there, personally, I met my better half, and she had already committed to a job here in Los Angeles. So long story short, I ultimately followed her out here to LA. My first job in LA was on the product side. I worked for a tech startup in the music space called Topspin. So I kind of realized that dream kind of came together for me. And I also got my first experience in product management. I went on to become head of product at another small media startup called Big Frame, which we eventually sold to Awesomeness TV. So I went on to Awesomeness. I joined Awesomeness via that acquisition, of Big Frame. I did a product job there for about a year, and then I was promoted into the role of CTO. And I held that CTO job for about 5 years. I oversaw product, engineering, IT, and a media operations team. When I joined, Awesomeness was about 100 people, and we grew that company to about 350 FTEs and an army of production folks and freelancers that supported the media studio. We eventually sold Awesomeness to Viacom, and so I made my exit from Awesomeness then. That was around the end of 2018. Took a little time off to spend time with my new baby, who was about 1, and kind of look for my next thing. I ended up, I found Zephyr, and I ended up joining Zephyr in February of 2019. So I've been there about a year and a half. Zephyr is a contextual data company. We do human-trained machine learning to understand video on platforms like YouTube and Facebook, and to enable advertisers to run brand-safe and brand-suitable advertising on those platforms at scale. My team currently is about 50 people. We have 4 product managers, a UX designer, and about 40 engineers. We're mostly here in LA. We have a really small team in Mexico. And that brings us to today. So full disclosure, this is my first global crisis, really. The others that I think we've lived through, those of us in this cohort, don't come anywhere close. So this is all really new. But I've picked up a few things along the way that I want to share. First of all, to kind of level set, a lot has happened this year. I just want to take us back to March when the reality of COVID really just started to set in. And we had no idea what would happen, but things felt really bleak. Cities were closing, events were being canceled, the stock market was crashing, people were hoarding toilet paper, as Ethan mentioned. Everyone really went into wait and see mode, and so did we at Zephyr. We closed the offices, we did some belt tightening, we lost some big customers, a few of us took pay cuts, we lost some staff, we laid a few people off. And that was all really, really tough, as I'm sure it was for many of us here today. It was a pretty bleak period of time. Today, things look a lot brighter. Specifically, I'm pleased to say that we didn't really ease up too much on our quarterly goal planning for the product and tech org. And with just one or two exceptions, we've really hit all of our goals this year, which under the work from home circumstances is, was an unexpected surprise for us, I think. And two, our company has exceeded the revenue goals that we set for ourselves at the beginning of the year, even before COVID. So if the proof is in the pudding, then we're succeeding, and we're really happy with where we are right now. So I want to share some of what we've done during this crisis and some of what I've learned along the way. First of all, as a leader, I have made it a huge priority to make myself accessible to the team and to my peers. And we made a couple of changes right away. So first of all, we do stand-ups every day. We've always done stand-ups every day, but I didn't always attend. Our CTO didn't always attend. It was more, we were focused around squads. Now we have one tech leadership stand-up every day where it's me, our CTO, Oded Noy, all of our PMs and all of our tech leads. And we expanded the circle there to increase the information flow, and that's been really helpful. Two, I've always done one-on-ones with my directs, but I've gotten a lot more religious about them. We don't skip them. We do them, when we say we will. And I've added some with my peers to kind of increase that cross-functional flow as well. Three, we've added some skip level meetings. It's just folks that I don't overlap with on a day-to-day basis as much. I really want to keep in touch with everybody and make sure that I'm available to them and I know what's going on and I can be helpful. So adding those has been helpful as well. And finally, where I've always kind of had an open door policy at the office, I now have an open calendar policy. All my free busy is open, and I really enthusiastically try to accept almost any incoming request. So for me, it's been all about keeping the lines of communication open and keeping people talking, and that's had a big positive impact. The next kind of area of learnings for me has been around flexibility. As a product org, we have had to be really flexible with where we're spending our energy in order to support the business. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that this year didn't turn out the way I expected it to, and so we've had to change a lot of plans. Because we're in advertising, a lot of our world revolves around tentpole events, and tentpole events basically haven't happened in 2020. So that has hurt us, and turns out it's helped us. On the one hand, we had major plans around the Olympics. We have a bunch of partnerships with Japanese agencies, a bunch of campaigns planned, specialized. We even had travel planned. And when the Olympics were postponed to 2021, all of that was squashed, and that really hurt. On the other hand, when all the live sports started to wind down, all of the advertisers, our partners and otherwise, that had planned to run on things like March Madness, the beginning of the MLB season, the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, all of those events, all of those plans needed to go elsewhere. And we were able to step in and absorb a lot of that business. And so that helped us a lot. In order to make that happen, we did a few specific things. One is that we actively went out and pitched the advertisers that we knew were pulling back from TV. Two is that we launched a site that it was a cool, kind of marketing thing. We launched a site that reported on related trends that were happening around the times. Things, for example, like people were watching video at different times of day, and they were watching different stuff than they usually do. And all of that's interesting for advertisers in our world. And so that site generated a bunch of interest and created a ton of inbound for us that we were able to convert into spend, and that we wouldn't have otherwise had if we hadn't acted in a really, quick and nimble way. And three, we shifted a bunch of our product and engineering resources to accommodate the changes that we were making. That required changing the roadmap, but for us, it was worth it. And so my takeaway was, drive the roadmap. Don't let it drive you. We've learned to be bold in this period when the inclination is to be conservative, and that has paid off as well. So one, we've taken some shots that came our way that were risky, but they've paid off. So I'm going to give an example. We're under NDA, so I can't mention the client by name, but what I can say is that we have a very large advertiser who's a client in the political space that spends a whole boatload of money every 4 years. And they came to us with a big opportunity, and we jumped at it. The problem was when we got into the details of how they run their business and how they structure their ad campaigns, it turned out that our production tools wouldn't have worked for them at all. But we were working on a prototype of a different version of our tool set that would be great. And so we did a real quick huddle with me and my team, PM on the product, lead engineer, sales contact, and agreed to offer it to the client, and they snapped it up. So we basically went into overdrive and interrupted our sprint, which we try not to do typically, to get it over the finish line and get it into production. And I am sure glad we did, because today we're running the equivalent of an 8-figure annual budget for advertising money through that prototype. And it's been a bet well taken. The sort of the takeaway there for us has been that you need to continue to move forward there and take those calculated risks. And finally, last but not least, this area of learnings that I have is really just to be human, to connect with people on a human level, people in your org, the other, peers and colleagues. And so specifically when I say that, crises are crises because of how they affect people. And everyone's in crisis right now. So everybody needs a little bit of empathy, and, leadership included. I personally have 2 little kids. They're 1 and they're 3. They used to go to a wonderful daycare and they'd be out of my house for 8 hours a day. It's clearly not happening right now. So I get it. That makes me really sympathetic with other parents. But, outside of the parenting thing, I have employees who have, family members who are essential workers. I have employees whose parents have been sick, all sorts of things. And it's just sort of a reminder to me that everyone is going through something. And as a leader, the trick is to find the right balance to keep the car running on the rails, but also treating your colleagues with empathy. A couple specific things that we've done here. One is that we canceled our mid-year review cycle because we felt like we couldn't calibrate circumstances, right? Everybody is dealing with such varied things. There are parents with kids. There are like multi-generational households. There are people who, have children or family members with, essential jobs. And there's, just been tons of stress and anxiety and uncertainty. People's hours are different. And we felt like you effectively have to compare, right? When you're doing comp adjustments and doing mid-year reviews, we felt like we couldn't do that under the circumstances. We're heading into our end of year performance review cycle now, and we're modeling out right now what it would look like to give equal comp adjustments like across the board, so that we don't get into that game of like, well, you know, as a department, we want to average 5%. So we're going to give like her 7 and him 2. And, you know, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have to implicitly compare people's performance because of the varied circumstances. And so we're making that adjustment. On to the fun stuff. We have taken every reasonable opportunity to boost morale. We've heard, you know, all sorts of stories. And I'll shout out to our executive assistant, who is a genius and a miracle worker for pulling these things together. But we've done a bunch of things that have been really fun and I think have really helped with the team morale. One is that we threw a make your own pizza party. We had everybody delivered pizza kits from John and Vinny's, and we all got together on video conference and we made the pizzas. Kids were invited. That's me and my daughter in the bottom making a pizza together. And we did a trivia game while we had the pizzas cook, and the pizza order included cookie dough. So we made cookies while the pizzas were cooking for the kids. And we got just tremendous feedback on that. Everybody posted their photos. There were lots of videos, lots of sharing. It was a huge boost and just something to look forward to and something that was really fun for the team. We kicked off our annual hackathon this morning, and we always do some kind of swag. It's usually a t-shirt. This year we did quarantine kits. We did sweatpants and masks for everybody, branded with Zephyr 2020 Hackathon, and everybody has gotten a huge kick out of that. So just kind of on theme for the year. And then finally, we had a teammate get married a couple of weeks ago. Clearly we couldn't get together and do a big party for him, but we did do a very tightly choreographed Zoom meeting where everybody played a part, had a sign, and the cameras came on and off. And our CTO is an accomplished musician. He played the piano. Like it was a blast, and the guy loved it. He cried on camera, so success there. Those are just a few of the things that we have done that on the morale front, you know, which we're trying to relate to everybody on a really human level. And so to summarize, I think Reid Hoffman says this: business is a team sport. It's been my experience in this crisis that if you can find specific ways to take care of your employees, then they'll perform for the team. And those kind of fall into these buckets for me. It's, you know, be accessible, be flexible, be bold, and be human. And if your employees perform for the team, you're positioning the company for success. And if your team positions the company for success, even in a time of crisis, then you as a leader won't be stuck in the job of managing, but rather have the honor of leading. That's it. That's what I've learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. That was awesome keynote. So a couple of interesting things, at least my takeaway, right? I take how to think creatively, right? The example you mentioned, like created a video, sort of internet trends, right? That's something every now and then a product leader like us, right? We are so used to sort of just thinking and going with the flow, but like taking a step back and thinking, okay, is there anything differently, creative solutions we can sort of do? And you definitely have the whole team to support you with that kind of initiative, but it's a great sort of, you know, insights and sort of new process discovery, right? And the other thing, at least what I see is just being human part, right? Sometimes, especially during the crisis, right? You're like, everybody's trying to meet deadlines and like going forward, but at least for the product leads, you know, is there like, okay, take a step back and like, how can we make sure the morale is there and what else can we do, right? Actively sort of taking, it feels like you have sort of actively taking some time out of your daily calendars to kind of make that happen, right? Giving that thought, like, okay, what else can I do, as if it's like a deliverable, right? So thanks. I think at this point, we will take some questions from the audience. Let's see, I think. Okay, let's see. First question, what was your approach to assess the opportunity? Was it a gut instinct, or whether the opportunity was long-term, or would you close when the COVID is over?
Sorry, which opportunity?
New opportunity, the I think that you mentioned right there, when one door was closed, something else opened up, the new opportunity.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Gut instinct versus
It's a gut instinct, or whether the opportunity was long term, or
yeah.
yeah.
So the things that we did, one was I mentioned specifically that we went out and pitched advertisers that we know had money slated for, or at least expected had money slated for live sports on TV, and we pitched them on our business. Really, that was just like a matter of kind of creative sales. Our core product perfectly suits some of those advertisers. They're just not always used to using it. And so I would say, we had to be flexible as a team, but as a digital business, we're sort of inherently flexible. And so we were able to move fast. And, in the ad industry, a lot of times like investments are slated long in advance, and there are commitments, on an annual level and stuff like that. It's hard for those advertisers to be flexible because they're kind of tied up in these contracts and stuff. We're a lot more flexible, and we just add a lot of flexibility. So when we were able to win some of that business, we were able to show them that it doesn't really have to be that way, And so that's kind of, there's a long-term benefit there for us and for the customer to realizing that switch.
Cool. All right. Next question. If you could go back to March, is there anything you wish Zephyr did differently?
I frankly would have, on the product and engineering side, I would have adjusted our quarterly goal setting a little bit, because this is a little on the be human front. We drove people pretty hard. I mean, I think I would have ratcheted down kind of what we committed to do so that we could be more confident that we were going to deliver on our promises. And everybody might have felt a little bit of relief from that.
Makes sense. So this is now your hindsight that the crisis is going to lasted this long.
Yeah.
In March, April, it didn't sound like there was that of a hindsight of how it's going to last.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in March, nobody knew that the offices would still be closed in October and beyond, of course. So in hindsight, I certainly would have made, different plans, knowing that we would be working from home for so long.
Cool. The next one, and we have a lot of questions, so Jen,
Okay.
don't mind, right? We'll keep going, and we have until 2:55, so we'll keep going. So, the next one is about offering the prototype solutions to the political client, right? Considering it's a risky move and sensitive company situation, were there any mitigation plans in case the prototype would have not performed as expected?
The mitigation would have been for us to expend a tremendous amount of manual effort to shoehorn it into the production tools. Because the difference was the way that our tools work is basically, if you want to use Zephyr contextual data to run an advertising campaign, we can either build your campaign structure for you inside the DSP, which would be Google Ads or DV360. We can build the structure for you and then launch the targeting into the structure, or the prototype is basically like you build your own structure and we can just like push stuff over there. The way we build the structure didn't accommodate the way that they want to run their campaigns. We could have made it happen. It just would have been a ton of pain for the ad operations team at Zephyr. So sure, that was always a fallback, but the prototype was a much, much better solution.
Got it. So to summarize, essentially you would have prototype, if it would have not worked, it would have sort of become a part of production tool, which other buyers or other sort of clients would have found it valuable at some point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, prototype we absolutely felt would be useful long-term, but in this case, I think like a lot of companies do, there's no way we were saying no to the business. We were going to make it happen one way or another. This just is a lot less, it's a lot less painful, and it's a lot more beneficial to us because we have all the learnings now.
So this is interesting. The next question is a little bit of follow on to the same topic, right? So in a smaller you have worked for both large and smaller organization, right? In smaller organizations, a little bit easier to pivot, right? Okay, if you want to do X, you do X. If you want to do Y, okay, let's. Do you have any recommendation? How do you do that in larger organization? I think you work for SAP, which is one of the biggest, like global 500 Fortune 500 company, right?
Yeah. I'll say that was a much slower ship to steer. That's for sure. I mean, Zephyr's about 150 people. So by comparison, you know, SAP must be, I don't even know, 80,000 or 100 at this point. I think that the advice that I would offer is, you know, you might not be able to pivot the entire roadmap. Like, it's probably not inside your purview, you know. But you might be able to pivot, you know, small pieces or even features and steer those in a direction that you think makes sense. That I would just say start small, step by step.
Great. Let's see. Let's do next few questions. The next one is, how does your team leverage communication tool like Slack to keep everybody in loop while being remote, right? And maybe not Slack, but if you're using other tools, whatever, whichever.
Well, to answer the question, how does our team use Slack? The answer is constantly. I think we do probably what most teams do. We have channels for squads. The way that we do product development is a cross-functional squads around a project or an initiative. So we have product engineering and design, plus sometimes like business analysts involved in each squad, and each squad has a channel and they talk inside that channel all day long. Something that's like very specific is if we ever have an outage or a breakdown in service, if we ever have like a SEV, we always create pager duty for that SEV, and we always create an associated Slack channel for the SEV, for the ticket and pager duty. And then all communication around that issue happens inside that channel. That's one thing that, responding to incidents is one major thing that's different under remote work. And we do that. That's partly how we handle communications there. And the other thing is war room is if we ever need to like kind of build a war room around building a high urgency feature. Normally we would put everybody in a conference room and close the door, you know, and like nobody comes out till it's done kind of thing. Exaggeration, but you can't do that in remote. So instead we've tried a couple things. We use Slack for that with a channel, but the team has also used a tool called Gather. I personally haven't used it, but they actually really like it. I guess it allows you to kind of go in and out a little bit more than you can do from Slack channels. So constant communication on Slack all day, every day.
Yeah, war room is an interesting concept. Even back, like we have done it for major launch, right? Like, okay, everybody's there. I mean, of course, last 6 months has been a little bit remote, but generally, right, everybody's there. So you don't have to track down anybody after major launch if there are any issues or anything which needs a quick attention. Right, so that's a good concept. I think, let's see, last question. Actually, we have a little bit of time. If you're okay, Jen, we'll go a few more.
Sure.
Let's see. What's your take on sort of digital transformation, right? How do you see the crisis? Of course, the crisis has accelerated it, but the clients you work with, right? What's your sort of take on that?
Transformation from what exactly?
Digital transformation, just organization, maybe in your context, would be more sort of the clients, your own organization, just sort of using tools and technology and basically just doing away with some of the old paper-based stuff, you know, workflows and everything getting automated, right? A lot of self-service tools.
I mean, so in our world, nothing really happens on paper, but there has been something of a shift from what has traditionally been like our managed media business towards self-serve. I think that's kind of a larger trend in advertising where in the managed media business, you know, a big company or a big agency pays you to run the campaigns and click all the buttons and do all the work for them. There's definitely a trend more towards self-serve there. Agencies and brands want to actually execute the campaigns on their own, save a little bit of money to do that. That trend is alive and well for us. All of it's digital for us, but you know, that's kind of a macro trend there.
Let's see. How often do your squads get reconfigured?
Good question. We do planning roughly in quarters, but it's not actually a quarter. We call it a batch. And what we've typically done in the past is we set the length of, you know, a batch of work around live events. So like if we're going to go to do something like, you know, Con or Ad Week or, you know, one of the big conferences, or there's a major advertising event like the Super Bowl, like, you know, that might be relevant. We structure our planning cycles around those things so that if we're doing a new feature set release or if we're going to bring a new product to market, this year it was CES. We took Zephyr's new contextual data platform to soft launch at CES. So we ended our basically quarterly batch around, you know, just before January 6th. The way that we structure it, so squads roughly stay intact during a batch, and then we move on after that. And we like to do self signups. So we don't have like, you know, our VP of engineering doesn't assign everybody, you know, the people who are going on to each batch. What we typically do at the beginning of the planning cycle is we do a kickoff presentation where product says, okay, these are all of the things that we want to work on this batch. These are the goals. These are going to be the KPIs. And engineer, and they groom them so that we'll set like, for over the course of a week or two, each PM will host a grooming session where they explain, you know, here are the product goals, here's what we want to do, here are the features that we think we're going to include, or, you know, the epics or whatever. And engineers can sit in, learn about it, decide if it's something they want to work on or not. And then if they do, then they sign up for that squad, and then they'll be assigned to that squad for the batch. And we try not to disrupt the squads during the batch, so it's roughly quarterly.
Cool. Thanks. One actually question I had. So in terms of the squads, so it sounds like, just to confirm, it's sort of planned around milestones, right? Like events, like every year you might have like 4 or 5 different sort of events. And so basically it sounds like, is that product team also sort of can select which sort of squad they want to be part of?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the product team also, you know, PMs will develop like pretty strong expertise in a certain area and kind of want to stick with it and see it through. At least some of ours have. And so we typically have one PM who will be assigned to a product, and, you know, they launch it, they do the next couple batches, they stick with it for a while. But we absolutely encourage everybody to move around a little bit. And our portfolio has more products in it than we do PMs. So if we want to shift focus from one product to another, and that product hasn't been in active development lately, and there hasn't been a PM assigned to it, then we have no choice, but somebody's got to go over and cover it. So yeah, PMs are self-selecting too. I would say that they typically stay with a squad longer than the engineers do, but that's that's a choice.
All right. Last question then. Did you take any risks that didn't turn out, and what did you learn?
Yeah. We made a pretty big investment in doing some like intense user research. This is kind of like a resource allocation risk, not exactly a product risk, but we made a big investment in doing some user research, and then we hired a firm, we we ran all of these like diagnostics, got all of these reviews of the products, and prepped for user interviews and everything. And honestly, we have not been able to get that user research phase actually off the ground. It's sort of a combination of like our customers don't want to spend the time, and it's like frankly been hard for us to get agreement across teams in order to do it. And so yeah, that was kind of a risk for the product team to say that we're going to do this thing that we've never actually done before in this honest way. We're going to do it, and we lined up all our ducks, and we actually haven't gotten it done. So it hasn't panned out.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us. I hope, I got a lot of learnings out of it. So hopefully everybody else in the members kind of got some great insight from your keynote. Thanks again, Jen.
Thank you for having me.